Welcome to the Moments That Matter podcast. I am your host, Laura Escamilla, and today I have a guest, Alfonso Mendoza, who works in education. He is a former educator and currently a host of podcast My EdTech Life. His podcast has become a platform to help empower educators, and Fonz has met and interviewed educators and leaders at the forefront of education technology. Fonz is here to help us understand the use of artificial intelligence, better known as AI, in education. And we're discussing first defining educational technology, and it really encompasses everything. And it is both the technology specifically designed for education, but also technology in general used in the education setting. So this topic is very much out of my scope. However, I do feel it's important discussion to be had specifically to inform parents of college students to understand the changing environment of education, but also the changing workforce for their children as they're going to be exiting college and how to work with that. So if you could just introduce yourself for us and tell us a little bit about your expertise.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me to the show. I'm very excited. It's very rare I get to be on the other side many times, sharing my story and sharing my experiences. But like you mentioned, I am an instructional technologist, consider myself an advocate for educational technology, which, like you mentioned, not only encompasses education. I mean, it says educational technology, but really in any kind of setting, there is someone in my role and in your husband's role, Isaac, who's my colleague, where we are tasked to create learning experiences for anybody that we work with, depending on what it is that they may need, from, learning modules to short videos, how-to guides, things of that sort. So we work with adults. And I have had the experience of working in the classroom, 11 years in the classroom, high school, all the way down to elementary. And I'm just excited to be here to discuss really the two biggest letters that are on everybody's mouths since probably November of last year, which is AI, and a lot of fear around that, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of doubt, a lot of excitement as well. So looking forward to speaking to you about that and my experience also as a doctoral student implementing artificial intelligence into my current work and course as well.
So as you mentioned, I mean, AI is kind of a scary term right now. So if you could just explain the concept of artificial intelligence, of AI, and particularly ChatGPT, that's right now the biggest platform or the biggest thing that's going on and being used or trying to figure out how to properly use it. So you can just explain for someone like me.
Yeah, sure. So in very simple terms, what I want to also share is that artificial intelligence has been around for a very long time, but we may just not notice it because it's usually hidden behind the scenes. So for example, this podcast that we're recording, there's a platform that will fix the sound. Those are some algorithms there. That is some artificial intelligence. On your phones, when you get the spell check or you get the sentence little word completer for your text, there's a lot of AI involved in that. In the education setting, for parents, I just want to inform you that a lot of the platforms that your son or daughters may use within education, they all have some form of algorithm that if they continue to do well, it'll continue to advance them. Or if they find some difficulties, then the program will slow them down a little bit and try and close those gaps in knowledge. It's always been there on the back end, but now that it came in the forefront, November 2022, people have been concerned, and they have every right to be. New technology, new uses, trying to navigate that space. Well, the biggest thing, ChatGPT, a lot of it has to deal with the information, privacy, things of that sort. So those are some of the main questions that may come about.
So higher education institutions and universities are reacting differently to this. So in different ways with chatbots and ChatGPT and AI assisted work. And I know that even at the high school level, some of the schools have banned use of ChatGPT and homework assignments and that kind of thing. But I also know that some of the schools, universities are trying to embrace it. And I think we're all just trying to figure out how to properly use it, safely use it, right?
Yes.
So what would you think is the biggest obstacle there?
I think the biggest obstacle is, again, changing a mindset. Back in my day when I was in elementary, my ChatGPT was my Encyclopedia Britannica. They would drop me off at the library. I had to do a report. I would just open up the encyclopedia and I was just copying because they never really taught us how to do a report or really
Right.
cite. It was just like find some research and go ahead and do those things. Then internet,
Right.
you know,
Well, we're both old enough to remember when the internet started, right? I remember that sounds very surreal, but in our education, our generation, like you said, mentioning the encyclopedia, that's what we're using. Going to the library and using the Dewey Decimal System to
yes.
find a book and to research papers or going through the microfiche, right? To
Yeah.
look up articles. When it kind of evolved and we're going to college, using the internet articles was blasphemy. Where is this coming from? Is this information factual? Who's writing it? And can you use it as a source? There wasn't even direction on how to cite these things. So I remember that vividly on that procedure. So I feel like this is very much the same
Yeah.
obstacle.
And that reminds me of when I was in university here at UTRGV also, you mentioned microfiche. I remember long hours just spending finding
Right.
articles for my business course and so on. And then of
And
course,
that sounds absurd now to think about spending that
yeah,
time looking through that stuff.
absolutely. I agree with you 100% because now it's you just type it in and you get a search and now the AI is built into that search and it'll bring out sources. And now it's getting better to where it'll actually cite the source. And even if you go and reference that, you see that it's done accurately.
Right.
And
It
I'm
does
like,
it for you.
yeah, yeah. So that brings the question too, like we were talking about in the education landscape. A lot of universities now, actually, I saw an article, and I want to say it was Vanderbilt, but there is a university that already said we're not going to be using Turnitin, which is a program that many students, even here at high schools, would submit their work and it'll cross reference and check to see if there's
Mhm.
anything for plagiarism and so on.
Mhm.
But we know plagiarism checkers are not 100% accurate. And the last thing that you want to do is to penalize a student who actually did the work. They cited everything correctly. Everything was fine. But then because of this AI,
It's their word against a machine, right?
exactly. So there have been a lot of schools that have kind of gone that route. But what it's causing a stir is that it's redefining education and redefining the assignments. Are the students writing essays just for stamina? Or are they writing it for content and application?
Quality versus quantity, right?
Exactly. So that's where a lot of universities are going. I know that my doctoral program has actually embraced it and has been allowing students and helping them to use it properly, responsibly. And even in my own coursework, using it as kind of a review guide. My professor gives me my rubric, and then I put in my writing based on that rubric, and I get some feedback.
Mhm.
So sometimes the professor may not get back in ample time, but at least I have something to work with. And then I can turn in as much of a polished copy as I can based on the rubric and the expectations.
Right. And even in my research, there are a lot of benefits that I have read about that in higher education specifically, and the personalized experience, especially with students with disabilities and also language barriers. There's a lot of students, especially in our area, that are primarily Spanish speaking. So going to a university setting, yes, courses are in English, but AI can be used to make that experience better and modifying it and have a more personalized experience. And I think that's a great benefit in this college setting because there's a lot of Hispanic communities all over the country.
Yeah.
And
Well, if you don't mind, I wanted to add one thing too. I did have a guest. His name is Daniel Lopez. He also has a podcast called AI Conversation
Mhm.
or Education Conversation. And what he does is he does something very similar to what you do, where he works with high school students that are getting ready to transition. And you mentioned something that really brought that story to mind. Like you said, a lot of Hispanic communities here, parents that do not speak or read even sometimes English or Spanish, their native language. So when the young daughter received her paper for acceptance and scholarships and the EFC, she got so excited, like, oh, I'm going to go to this college. And he asked, well, do you know what this means?
Mhm.
She's like, no, no, I'm excited because I'm getting in. But the EFC number was like a big number
Mhm.
and she didn't know how to interpret that or what that meant. So what he did is he said, I wonder if ChatGPT can help
Mhm.
interpret this and then also even put it in the native language to explain to the parents. And like I said, it's a sad story, but they had to reconsider where they were going because now the parents understood
That it meant they couldn't afford
that it
that.
meant that it couldn't afford it. But
That's amazing that it
yeah.
was able to do that, because
hmm
that's a very difficult thing to do when you're speaking the same language. It's difficult to get a parent to understand that the idea of an EFC score or interpreting their FAFSA more or less when they're
Oh
speaking a
my
different
gosh.
language when it's not their
And it's not just them, even myself as a current student, when
right,
I get that sheet in and I'm reading, I'm like, okay, like I see that number, but
right,
then I have my bill. Okay, as long as I pay this, I'm good. And
right,
that's it. But
right,
because there's a lot of lingo there that I'm not familiar with, but I can get by. Like you mentioned, I see the benefit for these first generation college students, second generation college students, or just even to be able to take that information and translate it into any language where the parent can get a really good sense of what it's going to
right,
take for their son or daughter to get into that next level of higher ed.
right,
So, yeah.
That's a very powerful use case. And I
right,
hadn't considered that in
Yeah.
any way whatsoever because, I mean, we are fortunate enough not to really have to. But for those that need to, it is, well, I would say a game changer.
right.
Yeah.
And the
It's incredible.
parents don't have, or the student doesn't have to find a professional that speaks that
hmm
language anymore, right?
hmm
Because you can, as long as you know what prompts to put in
hmm
and how to ask the questions, they can get the necessary
Yeah.
information. Which leads me to my next question is that I know that there's a lot of courses that I think are amazing. And I did a course on the side of prompt engineering, right? This is, I think, a really important skill that needs to be taught in colleges and universities as we're evolving into this new generation of learning. What do you feel would be the best utilization of prompt engineering?
I believe that now, as more students, more professionals like ourselves, and people that have access to this technology, at the very beginning, it's like, oh, prompt engineers, everybody's going to be looking for a
Hmm.
prompt engineer. But really, with as much time as you spend on it, everybody kind of becomes very well versed in prompts or
Hmm.
prompt engineering. So now it's more, how can you navigate and can you help our group navigate, and how quickly can you adapt to the new model or quickly adapt to the new program and platform. But yes, I do find that it's very important so they can have some groundwork and a foundation to
Hmm.
understand. And that's one of the things too that I always tell teachers, because I had a training this week working with an art teacher, and I showed them how the student can put in a
Hmm.
prompt stating, I would love a scenery in this style of artist, and showing this, and it brought the picture up. The gentleman was so blown away. He's like, this is too much of a finished product.
Hmm.
And he goes, maybe I'm getting old. And they were talking about the critical thinking. I said, well, you kind of have to understand that the student based that off of what you taught them initially. And as they started putting their prompt together, they had to really think to see what specific outcome they really needed. So there's a lot of critical thinking there and putting the words together, because even though it looks like a finished product, it may not be what that expectation is based off of that rubric.
And it wouldn't have generated it if they hadn't, right?
Exactly.
Which
To
was
those things.
my obstacle mentally, professionally, because I did use ChatGPT for the first time. I think it was back in April, encouraged by Isaac because he uses it and he's comfortable with it. I had a situation that I was very uncomfortable with on how to properly explain to my donors of an issue that was occurring. And I couldn't find the right words, and I knew what I wanted it to say, what I wanted the message to convey. So Isaac encouraged me to enter this information just to get, like, give me a post about this. And so I entered what I was trying to say, and it generated exactly what I was trying to convey. And I kind of felt like a fraud. It took me back a little bit because I'm like, well, it did it for me. I should have sat here for 30 minutes trying to figure out how to do this and how to write this properly. And I slowly started to understand that it was just a tool. Like, I gave it all the information that I wanted it to convey. It just put it together nicely in a package for me. Since then, I have used it a lot. It was a tool, like I use everything else. Like, I use Grammarly to correct my spelling and tenses and those things. Those are very natural parts of my professional life. So these are all the same thing. It's all AI. And so that
Absolutely.
was, I think, what we're shifting to in our world. And I think it's important for parents and college students to understand that you're not cheating, you're using the tool, right? You have
Yeah.
to give it the right prompts.
Right.
And we discussed in college essays, I said in a course where you're not asking it to write the essay for you, but even an outline like if this is what I'm trying to do, just to help you
Mhm.
write something. And that's not cheating. It's not doing it for you because you have to give it all the information that you
Right.
want. So,
Right. And with that, I think like the more so now there's a shift. Oftentimes for us in education, it was like, how much do you know? How much knowledge can you store up and
mhm,
memorize and so on? And if you recall back then, we're definitely aging ourselves. In the Encyclopedia Britannica days, I had
right,
15 numbers memorized, phone numbers. Now that I have my cell phone, I only have my home number and my wife's number, and that's it. And I don't need to memorize anything else because
right,
it's in my pocket. So now it's not so much focusing on that memorization, but it's more on application.
right,
And that's what I love that there's that shift. I'm not saying to not learn things and to store up knowledge, but now the shift is applying it. How
right.
can we see it in real life application? And that's what I love about my job. And I know with Isaac, like him and I will have conversations. It's like, hey man, how do you do this? Or what should we do here and so on? Because we're applying it
Right.
and it's
Well, Isaac helped me realize that I was being more efficient. Because, yes, I could sit here for an hour and try to figure out the right words, but I don't have to. I can use this tool and I was done. I didn't have to sit here and rack my brain on exactly the right words and that kind of thing. Of course, I modified it. It wasn't just a copy and paste, but it definitely help generate more thoughts and more thought process and help me get it done. But yes, I could have sat there for hours. So I'm being more efficient really and move on to the next thing, which
yeah,
is great.
yeah.
I
And,
did the same thing last week. I did a presentation for some students, and it was a all morning experience. And I talked to some young freshmen at one of our high schools, and I used ChatGPT to produce exactly what I was going to say down to the minute. What I did was I took the initial email, the request from a friend, a colleague, asking if I could do XYZ and present this information to these kids. I copy and pasted her email into ChatGPT. Is like, please give me a presentation down to the minute by using this information. And it gave me the breakdown. It gave me all the bones of what I needed to do. I said 40 minutes and it gave me it down to the minute. And that was the bones of the presentation. So all I did was fill in the content, which was easy for me because it was laid out for me. And sometimes building the bones, building the structure of what I'm going to do will take me 2 hours because I'll second guess like, well, maybe I'll put this before this, or maybe I'll omit this and just shuffling things around. No, no, no. It built all the compartments for me and I filled in the content and I presented and it flowed very naturally, very organically, and very easily. So it saved me a ton of time. And I think it was a success. Everybody
yeah,
was smiling when they left.
yeah.
So
Right. And I know that there's concern with AI taking over jobs and the job market and what that means for college students. But I think, yes, if we can all see it as a tool, you'll recognize that you just need to learn new skills, right, to use these tools, but that doesn't mean it's going to replace anything. And even for college students with simpler things, with our daughter, she was applying for jobs. And in college, she was parliamentarian of her sorority. And I was telling her, it's like, you need to note down those skills in your resume because you did that for 2 years and there are a lot of skills. And she's like, well, what skills exactly? I said, well, you had to do meetings, you had to oversee guidelines and all those kind of things. So I said, enter it in ChatGPT. How does my parliamentarian experience in a sorority in college translate to the business world? And I gave her a big list. I said, okay, now use that list and take what pertains to you and put it in your resume. And she did. But she's like, wow. But just because sometimes you can't process fast enough what's supposed to be happening
Right.
and you're not wasting time, you're being more efficient. Because yes, we could have sat there and like, okay, well, what did you do? But the role of a parliamentarian is finite. It is exactly this role in organizations. And that information is public and it's just applying it and helping apply the ideas together. So as a MBA student now, these are things that she's going to have to learn to utilize as part of entering the workforce
Yeah.
as we are using them now. And it's a learning experience, yes, but I think obviously a tool for efficiency.
Yeah. And I love what
Definitely.
you said there real quick. I just wanted to add to that is many people may not realize it doesn't matter what field you may be going in. You're going to learn a specific set of skills, but oftentimes we are so immersed just within our, let's say this is what I'm committing to as far as a
Mhm.
degree. And you just feel like, oh, this is it. This is me. I'm just closed off. But like you mentioned, putting in those skills and activities and being able to see what else they may transfer into is something that is game changing for somebody that may decide to say, you know what, I know I graduated in this field like myself. I have a bachelor's in business, but then I went into education
Mhm.
and a lot of those skills were transferable, the marketing skills, personalized learning, customer service, all of that. And so for Skylar, she could just easily put, "Hi, I got this skill now from the sorority, or I got this skill now from this job. How does that transfer over if she gets into law, or if she keeps going on with the MBA?" Like, wow, like that's amazing to be able to pop that in a resume and really see I can transfer that over easy.
Right. Just using that prompt in this tool to help you just process the thoughts a little more and see it. And you're like, yes, of course, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And we use AI all the time. As we started researching for this episode, we use Alexa all the time. We use Google Maps to get us somewhere. We get in the car, the first thing you do is enter the address, see how long it takes me to get there. That's all AI. And we talked about Grammarly and we talked about all that kind of stuff. We're using this every day.
Yeah.
This is really part of our everyday. And I know there's concerns, like you mentioned, about privacy and all of this information, but that concern has been there all the time. I mean, the whole time. Alexa could order something for me if she just hears me. These are things that we've been dealing with for a while before ChatGPT.
And I think just on the privacy note, the main concern is for me, I know that the age range, it's 18 and up, 13 and up, they moved it for ChatGPT. I know that it's being used in certain classrooms, not within our district yet, but the thing is that I love, though, is that although it's being used, it's not being used by the student. The teacher is the one that's navigating, but the activities that they're able to do together where the student, very similar, can say, "Hey, how about what if the story ended like this? Well, let's rewrite it right away and have those activities." So now you're learning how to navigate at a young age that by the time they get to higher ed, it's going to be their world. This is what they've seen. This is what they've known, and they're going to be experts at it. And who knows what the next step is in AI iteration.
Right. That sounds really great. Like a thought exercise for the students. What if this eventuality was different? If we change these variables that's applicable to math, that's applicable to so many disciplines. And circling back to Skylar and her experience with using it now for her MBA, she graduated from college, 2 years ago? So our son is in college right now. Lucas is in college right now. His experience with all of these tools is sort of a crash course. He's already using it and his friends all use it. And I asked him about it and he looked at me as if I was out of the loop, that I didn't understand. He said, "Yes, of course, Dad. Of course I use these things. Everybody uses them." I said, "Well, I don't know if there are rules and regulations at the university about using these things." And he says, "Yeah, some people are good with it. Some people aren't, but everybody uses it no matter what." So his experience with it, when he's done with his college education, is going to be vastly different than Skylar, who just graduated from college just a couple of years ago. And that's huge. So extrapolate that.
And vastly different than ours.
Right. But think of these young children, if their teacher, these leaders in instruction, these leaders in thought exercises and navigating these waters that are new to them, everything's new to them. They're so young, and what they can achieve standing on their shoulders and all the things that they can generate by the time they're in college. That's going to be amazing.
Well, it's going to be very similar to us telling our kids, we used to have to press buttons to use the phone or use the rotary. And they look at us like we're crazy. We're from a different time. And I always joke with the kids like, well, there's an apocalypse. I'm going to be able to survive because I'm used to a world without the internet. I know how to navigate this world. I know the Dewey Decimal System. I can go find a book. But what are you going to do? But this is the world we're living in. There's going to be these students who are now in elementary. Their whole world has this. And they're going to get to adulthood and be like, this has always been part of my life.
Right.
Where we as adults are still transitioning, well, before the internet, and thinking of when things were different, right? When we used to have to handle fax machines and all of these.
I don't like fax machines.
Yes.
I
when
don't
you
like
say
fax
that, I always
machines
think
at
of
all.
Isaac. It's like,
all of these things that the world has changed. You don't get faxes anymore. You get emails and that kind of thing. My first job when I was 21 years old, working in an office, the whole department shared one computer. And I can't even imagine. Each of us has multiple monitors and multiple computers. And that's just the world we live in 20 years later. And more than 20, but let's not.
I have 4 computers.
We'll keep it at 20. Let's round down.
Yeah, definitely. Fonz, before we continue, I'd like to ask, do you pay for ChatGPT? Did you use the more advanced version or do you use the free version?
No. I go with the advanced version. Yeah, the advanced version just because I want to get the ability to have all those plugins and all those additional tools that are useful. So one of my favorite tools is the reporting. Just because, for example, for my podcast, I'll download all the analytics I'll upload the analytics and just say, analyze this for me, show me what episodes did well, which episodes didn't do too well. And then that gives me an idea of where do I improve? How can I do this a little bit better? But also it just helps me with promotion as well. It's like, okay, do a little promo thing for me. And that's what I use it for. And also for work too.
Definitely. Fonz, for the benefit of the
Yeah.
audience, please let us know where to find your podcast.
You can go to www.myedtech.life, myedtech.life. You can go ahead and check out the podcast. We're 220 episodes deep, 3 years and 3 months into doing this, and it's been amazing.
Wow.
Tremendous.
I'm 3 months in and I'm second guessing life. This is a lot.
No. This is it. You've got some amazing content. You just keep doing it. I keep telling Isaac, like, she just needs to keep going.
I do follow your podcast, and I did notice that you did have somebody come on recently, an expert, talk about AI technologies for mental health. And that was really, I hadn't really thought about that, but just the access to healthcare and the medical field and this kind of thing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the company is Alongside Care. And so you can find them at alongside.care. And what it is, it's a company that is for school districts mainly. And what they do is if the school district buys the subscription, it is device agnostic. So as long as you belong to that school, anywhere you may be, whether it's at school, if you are at home, or you just never know, you may be even shopping and maybe you're having an anxiety attack or you're just not feeling well or you just need somebody to communicate with. So it opens up an app. It's a chatbot. It's a little llama. And you just tell it like, hey, I'm having an anxiety attack. And then what it'll do, it'll say, do you need some physical help or do you just need something to calm you down? So they type in. And what I love that it does is that it brings up some actionable things that they can do. So they can give you a video, like a breathing video, or if you're just looking for information that you may need, maybe there's just a tough conversation that you can't have with your parent, or maybe the counselors are bogged down and they can't see you. They'll bring up a video that you can watch. They have activities there where you can journal. And I mean, it gives you what you need. And again, this isn't like the remedy. This is some help, a tool just to get the students okay before they get to the counselor or get to the parent or get to some professional help because they may not have that access. And if you think about it, in any school district, there's always a subset of kids that are left out because parents can't afford that additional support. And this company, as long as you get the subscription, everybody has access to it. And that could be huge. It could be a game changer for many parents to be able to provide some service to their child and then go to the counselor, or they themselves can start learning how to self-regulate through the videos that they have, the journaling activities, the breathing activities. And that's huge.
Right. And how amazing at a school district, but also if something like that could translate to a higher institution, the college, because as we all know that our students today are dealing with a lot of mental health issues and not know how to deal with what they're feeling. Anxiety after an exam, before an exam, these kind of things in college are not things that as parents we're prepared for going in, because in high school, our kids may have been great students. They didn't really need it. But now in college, these exams and these results and these situations are overwhelming. And as parents, we don't always know how to deal with them. So if they had access to something, they could easily just like walk me through something to calm me down. If I were to get a phone call, that's the first thing I'd try to do. Well, breathe, calm down. And sometimes, like you mentioned, not every person has access to that or somebody to help with that. But how amazing is that? Is there any other advice you would have for college students with AI tools, ChatGPT, and enhancing their learning experience?
Yeah, my best advice is use it for what you are doing in your class. Yeah, you can have some fun with it and so on, but like I mentioned, sometimes your professor may not answer right away. Maybe you need additional help, or you just want to double check, triple check, quadruple check your writing and clarify. So you put your rubric in, put your writing in, compare it. It's going to give you some feedback. Ask it, how can I improve? What do I need to do? And just get very proficient with it in that sense, because It's going to be the go-to tool that you will have, and just really use it responsibly. Don't just pop in your assignment and say, okay, here it is. We can be very tempted because now it's coming out so fast, but really use it to go deeper into the content and into the learning and apply it in that way and just get clicky with it. I always tell everybody that I speak to when they find a new tech or anything, just get clicky with it, get to know it, get familiar, because it's going to be part of us now from here on out.
Right. I think it's a useful tool if they learn how to use it on a day-to-day basis with what they're doing when they get into the workforce. And as we do, just normal things, an email, a letter, and simple things, but it makes life more efficient, right?
Exactly.
Now, those who may not think that your work organization is not using it or that it would be prohibited in some way, there are some changes that are happening very rapidly. I know a lot of private organizations. I'm not going to name any names. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but those organizations are taking their internal data and they're putting it into their own branded version of the chat GPT or some sort of chatbot, and they're using it internally so that amongst each other. Now, they don't use those things publicly because publicly we don't want people to have that proprietary information, but don't mistake that they're not going to be using it. These companies are absolutely using it, and they're making changes and they're refining them in real time. These things are happening right now. So for those a few weeks ago that said, no, my company prohibits it. Well, they prohibit the public version, the one we pay for at ChatGPT 3.5 or 4. But they are, if they don't already have, they're going to have an internal branded version that has all of their company data that only operates on their company network.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, how great is that for onboarding? Even universities for the longest time have used chatbots, but I don't think it really took off. But I think now more so that students know what this does and the world that we're in, they're going to go click on that chatbot and it's like, hey, walk me through this, or who do I need to talk to about this? And it's going to direct you where you need to go. I mean,
I can see this replacing the website. If you go to a university website, they're not all great. Some of them are very difficult to navigate. Some of them are walled. You have to log in. And then even then, they're not laid out in a very efficient manner. But very short time from now, you're going to go to that university website and it's going to be a prompt. And you're just going to ask it what you need to ask it. And it's going to give it to you. And maybe on your app, on your mobile device, it's going to prompt you and say, hey, I noticed that you're here for orientation. Can I help you find what you're looking for? Without you even prompting your phone and navigate you and help you get what you need.
And I would love that. Remember that use case, like when we had one of our colleagues saying that they went to that orientation and that it was a hot mess.
Oh, yes.
And was very disorganized. So, but imagine showing up, like you mentioned, like on location where, I mean, my map tells me, hey, your car's parked here.
Yes.
So, I mean, we're already using it. It's there.
All of our phones know exactly where we are right now.
To kind of piggyback off what you're saying on the changes and that it would replace the website, it's not replacing the webmaster.
No.
It's just that the webmaster skills will need to change and adapt. So this is where your college education and use becomes so important, and universities adapting and trying to figure out how this works, because the job isn't going to go away, but the way the job is done and
is very different.
Right,
the
it's
medium
change.
will evolve.
Right.
Certainly.
So it's not going to replace somebody necessarily, but the skills they need for that job will change. And that's okay because our life evolves. But I think that's where our college students right now need to trying to figure out where we're at. Because like you said, the elementary student right now, it's going to be normal for them. But our college students right now that are in this changing time, this is where these skills become useful, because eventually the jobs they're going to look for now, as you know, our son as a business student, the analytics and all the things that are going to be happening. And in the future, by the time he gets into the workforce, learning how to use this is going to be so important.
Very much so.
And I think that's what our parents need to understand, not discouraging their students from trying to work with the tools and see how they work in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. In addition to that, like you were saying, just being able to adapt. And I know that maybe some parents may be thinking, because of this, should my son or daughter go into this? What if this job is obsolete and so on? But just like you mentioned, the webmaster just learned a new set of skills to adapt to the ever-growing and ever-changing pace of technology and the way that we live in. So it's not that the job became obsolete. It's just that now we're going in a different direction, and with that skill set that they've learned, and they continue to grow. So that's what I love about this, that we're always going to need people in the workforce, but we just need to make sure that we are always well equipped with any set of skills that can easily transfer into the world of tomorrow, because it's going to be a rapid change. And the more skills you have under your belt, you're going to be fine. And then I think it's going to be very cyclical. I think Isaac and I were talking about this too, where there's always that fear of like, oh, the internet's here. This is over. We're not going to be needing teachers anymore.
Mhm.
You're always going to need that personal touch. The AI cannot give that personal touch, that personalized touch as far as communication, empathy, all of that. So you still need that human aspect of it. The AI, like we talked about, is the tool, but the human is the medium to share that and make those connections. And that's still ever important. So, yeah, just things to think about there for the future.
Well, this is amazing information, and very insightful, and I feel better about my use of it for sure. Thank you so much for joining us. This was
Yes,
fun.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Big shout out. Honestly, I just want to give you props for the work that you're doing. I talk to Isaac all the time. So when there's a new release, I'm following you and I listen and I'm like, I know I'm not a parent, but man, if my parents had this information when I was coming up,
Mhm.
it would be so helpful. So keep doing what you're doing. I
Thank
encourage you to, I know that you may think like, oh, this is a lot. Push through because you're doing some amazing work.
Thank you. If we had the information when we were going through it,
Yes.
it would have been very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you again for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.